Hocker Construction and Junior Achievement would like to thank and recognize CMH Architects Incorporated as the proud sponsor of this video tribute honoring David Hocker as a 2024 Owensboro Business Hall of Fame laureate. David Hocker was born in 1938 in Owensboro, Kentucky at Davis County Hospital to Talmadge and Margaret Hocker. Talmadge Hocker was a school teacher for 16 years at Owensboro Junior High and Owensboro Tech High School, while Margaret was a homemaker for the Hocker family. Talmadge went to work for Carlos Jago, who owned the Davis County planing mill, and together they entered into the home construction business. When Carlos was drafted and went to serve in the military, Talmadge independently went on to build hundreds of homes over 30 years in neighborhoods across the Henderson and Owensboro areas. David Hocker had a very normal upbringing, playing sports and going to church. His parents were a great influence on him, making sure he behaved and in building a strong work ethic. David recalls at the age of 4 riding with his father in his truck while driving to Henderson to visit building sites. Cardinal Lane in Henderson was David's favorite, and it got him excited at an early age at the prospect of planning and constructing buildings himself. David has never ceased working throughout his life. His first jobs as a boy were mowing the neighbors' yards and delivering newspapers. He even pumped gas at the DNX Oldham gas station. In 1950, while at a football practice for the Junior High Football League, Wayman Morris delivered a hit on David that shook him to his core. David decided to leave the Longfellow field at that moment, realizing that sports were not for him and that maybe a life in business would suit him better. In 1956, while attending Kentucky Wesleyan College, David worked for his father doing accounting work and was also in the Army Reserves doing administrative work in Owensboro. He would continue in the reserves on a part-time basis for 8 years until 1964. At this time, David continued to work with his father in accounting and began to expand his knowledge into construction work. A pivotal moment for both David and Talmadge came from a visit to Louisville when they met with a retired real estate Kroger executive, Mel Harvin, to discuss how to best utilize a large assemblage of property that Talmadge had put together along Frederica Street in Owensboro. Mr. Harvin suggested that they work together to develop a shopping center on the site. When asked by Talmadge and Mr. Harvin if David could take on the task of developing a shopping center, David replied with a robust, "Yes, sir, I sure can." Talmadge's vision to have a portion of his purchased land zoned for commercial purposes combined with the help of Mr. Harvin and led to the development and construction, under David's guidance, of Wesleyan Park Plaza in 1964. Kroger, Super X Drugs, Value Village were all adjacent and connected by a front corridor so that shoppers could stay inside and visit a grocery, drugstore, and discounter. This novel configuration may have been the earliest superstore layout in the country. David continued to progress and focus on shopping center development and partnered with Alan Squitieri to develop 10 more shopping centers. After separating with Squitieri in the early 1980s, David was actively involved in the development and/or acquisition of 45 shopping centers, 17 of which were enclosed regional malls spanning across 13 states. The shopping center business is particularly sensitive to the general economic and interest rate environment. David first experienced this with Wesleyan Park Plaza when David pledged his personal assets to add W.T. Grant, which eventually became Kmart, to the shopping center at a time when lenders were becoming impatient. David stepping up for his father and shouldering the risk stabilized the property, preserved ownership of it with the Hocker family, and Wesleyan Park Plaza continues to be family-owned today and an important retail hub in the center of Owensboro. When the savings and loan crisis hit in the late 80s and early 90s, it crippled many commercial real estate owners. David faced this crisis head-on by renegotiating debt with many lenders and treating creditors responsibly and avoiding bankruptcy, which allowed the company to survive when many didn't. Despite these changing climates in the market, David Hocker was able to employ 400 people throughout the Southeast during this time. In 1988, David was named the chairman of the International Council of Shopping Centers, the industry trade organization consisting of approximately 80,000 members. He has enjoyed successful partnerships with major industry players, including Richard E. Jacobs, who owned the Cleveland Indians baseball team, CB&L Associates, Brookfield Properties, R. Fred Coffin, Cafaro, and JMB Realty. Since opening Wesleyan Park Plaza in 1964, David Hocker and Associates grew into a top 50 national owner, manager, and developer of shopping centers. During that growth, there was a push to relocate the company to a larger city where it would be easier to attract talent, easier to travel to and from locations, and that offered more development opportunities within a closer proximity. But David felt home was Owensboro, and instead of moving elsewhere, decided to attract skilled people to Owensboro. During the peak of David Hocker and Associates, 120 employees remained in Owensboro and frequently sponsored community events, and were lead contributors to United Way, Owensboro March of Dimes, the Owensboro Symphony Orchestra, and the Red Cross. They also purchased and renovated the historic Union Station, and then made a significant investment to expand the location to house David's growing company, and through this investment helped preserve its history for Owensboro. David is a longtime supporter of Kentucky Wesleyan College and was the chairman of its board for 12 years. He also served on the Owensboro Health Board as its chairman. The late 90s saw the advent of the internet, which changed the demand for enclosed malls. In the 1980s, there were approximately 2,500 malls nationwide. That number is down to 700 today. During this time, David Hocker and Associates strategically reduced its footprint, but has remained partners with Brookfield Properties, a New York Stock Exchange company, in about 1 million square feet in Tupelo, Mississippi, and remained focused on strip centers in Owensboro and Winchester, Kentucky. Over the years, the business also benefited from having many employees who participated in junior achievement in high school, where they learned early business skills with several former company executives serving on a volunteer basis to help JA. David credits his father for providing him with the opportunity to get a foothold in the shopping center business, which has allowed him to work for decades with his own son, Talmadge, who ran the leasing department and was a vital part of the success of the business. David's sister, Jane Anderson, worked for the company as the lease administrator, and her husband Richard worked along with brother-in-law Sonny Hall with leasing and building relationships for the business. David's father was also around the company for many years after his retirement, allowing it to remain a family-centric environment that performed at the top of the national stage. David Hocker has worked in many places, but he has remained faithful to his wonderful hometown of Owensboro, Kentucky, and has always called it home. David Hocker, the best in business, inspiring the next in business.